Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on August 5th, 2015. In the last episode, we just finished a chapter on linting, static code analysis. We wanted to get our code, our build set up so that with one command, we can check for any common syntax errors and things that the computer can find without actually running our code. And that's done. But of course, that is not the only kinds of mistakes you can make in your program. You can also write code that lints perfectly, but doesn't do what it's supposed to. That's where testing comes in. And in this chapter, we're going to start looking at doing that sort of testing. Not just testing that your code works in one circumstance, but that it actually works in the browser you're using and in all the browsers you're using. That's cross-browser testing. It's very important in JavaScript because different browsers actually can behave differently. JavaScript itself is fairly well specified and will be run identically across browsers, but the way you interface with the browser, the way you work with the document object model in the browser, that can be significantly different. So we need to have our tests work across browsers as well. Now, there are two types of cross-browser testing we need to think about. We need to worry about manual cross-browser testing so we can see how our code actually works. But manual cross-browser testing is very slow and painful, so we're also going to look at automated cross-browser testing. In today's episode, we're going to start by getting our code set up to work with manual testing. And now, as usual, no surprise here, we're going to do that in our build script. We're going to set up our build script so that we can type one command and have our code run in a way that allows us to load it in a browser. Now, right now, we don't have any code. So let's start out by just making ourselves a source directory and a simple hello world HTML file. So I'm going to create a new HTML file here. I'm going to call it index.html. WebStorm is going to put in some default boilerplate for me, and I'm just going to put in a simple hello world here. Now, we could manually test this. I mean, there's not a whole lot here, but it still can be tested by going into WebStorm and tell it to open the file locally. And it will sort of do this funny little localhost thing for us. We could also find this index.html by opening that directory in our Finder, and on Windows you do that with start source, and dragging that file over into Firefox. So there we go. And that, of course, will give us a file URL. I don't like either one of these approaches. Now, the WebStorm approach is better because with the WebStorm approach, at least we have a proper HTTP URL, that is, it's being served from a server rather than just being loaded off the file system, as you can see here. The reason you want an HTTP server is because, well, browsers behave differently when something is a file URL versus an HTTP URL. And in this simple case, you can't see any differences, and in fact, there aren't any differences. But in more complicated cases, there actually are differences. But even this isn't quite good enough because when we serve this out of a real server, we're not going to be serving it out of the /howto tab /source /index.html. We're actually just going to be serving, for this first index.html, we're just going to be serving something like that. And of course, that doesn't exist. And as we make our program more complicated, we might put in absolute paths that start with a slash and so forth. That just won't work with this approach. So what I want to do is set up a little local server. And as I said, the way we're going to do that is by updating our build. Unsurprisingly, the way we're going to get this local server set up and running is by installing a module. Let's start out by adding our little hello world file to source control. So we've created a placeholder index.html. And now we can install the server module. The server module I like to use, I imagine there's several, but the one I know about and the one I like is called HTTP server. It's a very simple, bare bones server. As usual, we'll install it with the ignore scripts option so that any binaries don't get checked into our repository. And we will save that to our package.json. This is something we'll only use in development, so we'll use the save dev option. So go ahead and install that. And now that we have it installed, we can run it as normal by typing node modules /bin/http server. And when we do that, if we point it at the source directory, it will serve source on our local host from the port 8080. And you might sometimes see this error message come up asking if you want to allow incoming connections. This is sort of a firewall behavior. You may or may not see something like that or something equivalent on Windows. So now that we have this running, we can load up our hello world by typing localhost 8080, and now you can see it's got the correct path. It's right here at /. So this is the most accurate. This is most like what we would see in production. And that's why I like using this localhost server, is because it is as close as we can get to actually running in production, or as close as we need to get as to actually running in production. So now that we have that going, we just need the ability to run this automatically. But first, of course, let's check this in and make sure we don't have any binaries. So I'll go ahead and add this, and then I'll say we've installed HTTP server. Then we'll do an npm rebuild to see if there's any binaries. But as normal, there's not. Now that we have this working, of course, we don't want to type node modules /bin/http server every time. So we're going to make this part of our build. The way we do that, we'll go into here. I'm going to split this out into multiple sections. So we'll have our supporting tasks section here. And in fact, let's do it this way. And we'll have our general purpose tasks here. So what I'm going to do is create a new task called, I think, run, that will run a localhost server. We'll call it run. It's not going to have any dependencies. And when it runs, it will run HTTP server right here. If we type Jake run, we should see that message come up. Perfect. Now, just like the way we ran lint the first time, the way we can run HTTP server is just by running jake.exec. So let's go ahead and do that now. If you'll recall, what we do here is we say jake.exec and then type the name of the function we want to run, which in this case is node, and we're going to run the HTTP server. We can't run it out of .bin because that actually will be different on Mac and Windows. So we're going to run it out of the bin directory of our HTTP server. So we'll say node modules, HTTP server, bin, HTTP server, source. And then we'll tell it to use the interactive option so that we can see the output, and to run the complete function when it's done. Let's give that a try. And there we go. We are serving that locally. And so if we reload here, there it is. It's working. And we know it's working because if I cancel it by pressing Control-C and reload, we get an unable to connect. Perfect. Exactly what we want. Now let's just confirm that everything worked properly by running a regular build, and it did not, because Jake is a global that we haven't told lint to look for. So what we need to do is come up here and add Jake as one of our globals. And in fact, to make this a little bit easier to read, I'm going to take out this white space here. So now everything should build correctly, and there we go. We have the ability to manually test our code locally by running Jake run and then visiting localhost 8080 in any browser. I'm using Firefox here, but of course we could use Chrome or Safari or any other browser we wanted as well. So I'm going to go ahead and check that in. And there you have it, manual testing of our code. Next time, we're going to look at automated testing of our code, which will allow us to test much more quickly than manual testing and make it feasible to automatically test against multiple browsers. Your exercise for this time, very straightforward. Just reproduce what we've done here. Modify your build file so that you can manually test your code. Create a simple little hello world or other index.html for testing, and then update your build file to allow you to load that in the browser. If you're feeling adventuresome, go ahead and explore the NPM ecosystem a bit and see if you can find another option other than HTTP server. I'm sure there is some out there. Honestly, once I found HTTP server, I stopped looking, but check it out. See what else you can find and see if there's anything that you like better. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.